Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Fractured Vows. Episode 7. Chapter 58. Lena, I tried to move, but everything hurt. My whole body feels like I have been in 20 rounds with bears. I felt every muscle and every wound that Naomi conflicted with me. I must have passed out more after she woke me up again and tortured me. I still couldn't feel Bex. I was on my own. As it hurt so much, I opened my eyes without moving my body but was met with blurriness. I blinked a few times, and after a few times, my vision came back. I stared ahead, but there was a movement to the side. I was in too much pain to look, but whoever came into the room, came into my line of sight, making my stomach drop. Naomi. Naomi stared at me and moved her head to the side, not saying anything. I stared at her, but there was something off about her. What? Her eyes scanned over my body, and she met my eyes, but the eyes I was looking back at were not Naomi's, they were a different color. Her wolf, it had to be. I wished for Bex to return to me, but I didn't know how much wolfsbane Naomi gave me. You look like death, Naomi said, only it wasn't her voice which confirmed her wolf was forward and not her. I stared at her, confused. Naomi's wolf moved her head to the other side. You don't know what's going on, do you? She said. I didn't say or do anything. My body was hurting. Well, I'm Elle, she said as she stared at me. My human did one hell of a number on you. I knew she had it in for you, but I never thought she would be like this. I stared at her and moved my mouth, clearing my throat. What do you mean? I rasped. Why are you on the surface? Elle stared at me but moved away for a moment. What was she doing? After a few seconds, Elle stepped in front of me again and placed a bottle of water on my lips, tipping it into my mouth. Drink, she said. I sipped the water, which made my throat stink slightly, which made me make a face. Ah, it's working, she says as she pulls back, turning the cap on the bottle of water. What's working? I asked as I cleared my throat again. Elle looked at me and smiled. I gave you something that will take away the wolfsbane, she said. Help bring your wolf back. I looked at her, confused again. Elle sighed. I know my human was a BH to you, she said. But I don't have much time, I need to talk to you, and I need your help. I looked at her. My head was hurting, but I stared at Elle as she continued. My human fell asleep after what she did to you, she said. I took over her body as she slept and even placed a block on her, so she won't know what I was doing. My eyes widened. The thing is, this is not the first time I have done this, she said and sighed. Elle looked at me. I need you to kill my human, she said. And me too. My eyes would have fallen out of their sockets if they widened any more. What? I whispered. Why? Elle stared at me. I hate what my human has become, she said. I can't forgive her for what she did to our mate, what she has caused between you and your mate, her brother's plan. Everything. I watched as she carried on. I watched her movements as her eyes kept going to the doorway. She was clearly making sure no one overheard her or was coming. My human wanted your mate, she said, pulling me from my thoughts and looking back at her. I knew what she did to you. I had no part in it, I was always blocked out when she did something. She never placed the block down until she was ready for me to learn about what she did. I felt my stomach drop slightly. Elle carried on as if her life depended on it. When we found our mate, I thought it would change her, she said as she huffed slightly. But no, she was going to reject him, but when your mate told her that you were his mate, it was like hell had taken over. I tried to reason with her, and we both came up with something. At the time, I found out about her alpha brother only by chance when his voice echoed in our head, she said. I didn't even know we joined his pack, which is ruined due to the alpha's reign on them. They all suffer back there. I could feel sadness wash over me as she looked at me. Her eyes went back to the door. I never thought an alpha could be so cruel, she said and looked back at me. My human didn't tell me anything, but I pleaded with her for me to have some alone time with our mate before she did anything untoward, and she agreed. I stared at her. This didn't sound like Naomi. She agreed. I asked, sounding more like a question than a statement. Elle frowned. Not at first, she said. I made a deal with her. Elle stopped and looked at me before she continued to speak again. The deal was I would be human and spend time with our mate while she went into the darkness, she said. I frowned. How is that possible? I asked. Elle gave me a small smile. I told her I would ask the moon goddess to take me away if she didn't, she said. She was reluctant at first, but she agreed. I told her I wouldn't mate or mark him till she was close by or ready for our mate. But she never came close by, she left me with him. You never marked your mate? I asked. Sadness washed over her as she shook her head. No, she said. As much as I should have, my human needed to be there with me. Elle looked back toward the doorway again. How long were you, Naomi? I asked. Did you shift? How did it work? You have too many questions, she muttered as she looked over to me with another small smile. I shifted whenever I needed to, and I didn't have anyone to answer to anyone, not even Naomi. Naomi stayed away, which was unheard of, and for how long? 5 years. I was sent back into her mind when she learned about you being back on the training ground. I stared at her. 5 years. That's a long time for a human to be in darkness. Wait, Naomi came back when she found out about me. Why when I came back home? I asked. Naomi never told me anything about her plan with her brother, she said, but sighed. She must have been in the darkness for too long with her own thoughts. She let me watch everything she had planned for when you would return. I was sickened to think Naomi would be that evil, but her father was the same. I had to learn everything about him too, which made me want to vomit in her head. I gulped. Elle looked at me. I'm telling you all this as I need you to help me, she said. I want you to kill Naomi and me. My eyes widened. I can't do that to you, I said. You don't deserve that. Naomi might deserve it, but you don't. Elle gave me a small smile. Thank you for all that, she said. It's nice to know that some decent humans are around. Elle, I whispered, but she shook her head. I know what you are going to say, but I have made my choice. I would rather be with our moon goddess than witness all this pain, all because my human and her brother want to be more powerful and want what they can't have. I stared at her. My mind was racing. I couldn't kill Elle. Naomi, yes, but her wolf, no. She never did anything to me. I can't do it, I said. I can't kill you. Elle looked at me, but her face hardened. You may not have a choice, she said as she walked toward me, twisting the cap off the water bottle again. Drink, she muttered as she placed the water to my mouth and let me drink. I gulped as the water slid down my throat and burned. As I finished the last drop of water, she threw the water bottle on the ground and made me look at her. I can give you a chance to kill her, she said. She wants me to play with you as a chew toy. But I won't. I will stay back. You must find your strength and take her down, even in human form. I stared at her. Could I kill Naomi? I never fought back. She never gave me a chance to fight her back. But I know I can take her. I took on stronger competitors than her in the ring. I could use my injuries to my advantage. My mind was filled with ideas on how to take her down. I need to go, Elle said, pulling me from my thoughts and looking back at her. Someone will try to find her as she fell asleep in one of the tents. I needed to make sure no one noticed it wasn't me, only her. I nodded. Elle looked at me and smiled. She turned away and walked toward the gate entrance. I turned to look at her, not caring about my pain. Elle, I called out, making her stop and look over her shoulder toward me. I smile. I will try my best, I said. I don't know if I can kill her, though. Elle smiled. I know you can, little wolf, she said. I have seen you fight in the ring. I watched it with Naomi. That's why I know you can do it. Naomi thinks she has you at your weakest because of all the torture she inflicted on you, but she didn't count on one thing. What's that? I asked, frowning. Me, she said as a slow smirk formed. I love my human, but I can't stand by everything she has done and plans to do. Her brother has his own agenda, but Naomi has hers. They both have been using one another to get what they want, but if one is taken down, the other will follow. I stared at her, but she continued. That Alpha wants you and the other Luna, she said. I think he wants to take you to the pack to prove that you are with him. He wants to kill your mate before you, to make you submit to him. Naomi is supposed to take you there. Killing Naomi will mess up the Alpha's plans. I felt my heart break at the thought of him killing Eli, but I nodded, trying to recover from what she said. Elle smiled again and moved. She opened the gate and walked through, but her eyes landed on me. Your wolf should come back to you soon, she said, and I watched as she walked through the doorway and was out of sight. I turned back toward the front and stared. My mind was racing with everything. I needed to plan, and I needed one fast. An image came to my mind of Eli. I hope he was looking or trying to prepare the pack members for what was to come. Knowing Alpha Trevor, he must have slipped up somewhere. Part of me wanted to think Eli was missing me, but I needed to stay focused. I can find all that out when I see him, but first, I must kill Naomi. I heard some noise outside where they were keeping me. I needed to come up with something and fast, I thought. Chapter 59. Eli. I woke up with a start. The nightmare I was having felt so real. I didn't even know when I fell asleep, but I did. I shot up and realized I was still in the office. I rubbed my eyes and looked around. I must have nodded off. I looked back at Blaze, but he was snoring in my head. I moved out of the chair and headed to the office door. No one was around, which was nice as I didn't want to see anyone. I left the office and went up to my room. Maybe a shower will wake me up, and I have to freshen up too. I walked into my room and headed straight into the bathroom. I switched on the shower and walked in. I placed my head under the water and couldn't help but close my eyes. The warmth of the water was what I needed. It felt like it was washing away everything, but even I knew that was too good to be true. I stayed under there for a while but knew I had to move. I walked out of the shower and switched it off. I wrapped a towel around my waist and headed back into the bedroom. I had no clue who else was up, but I glanced at the clock on the bedside table. It was 5 in the morning. I groaned out. I looked over to the window and headed there. I looked outside and noticed the sun rising. Pack members were supposed to be getting up soon to train. I turned around and headed to the closet. I picked out a pair of black sweatpants and a vest. I might as well look the part of training. I quickly got dressed and slipped on my shoes. I went to the door and walked out, heading down to the kitchen. It didn't take me long till I walked in, only to stop in my tracks. An Omega was cooking, but someone else was sitting on a chair around the counter. Nathan. Nathan looked up when he realized I was there and smiled. "Morning," he said, which made the Omega turn around. She bowed and went back to work after I motioned her to stop. "I couldn't sleep," he said as I walked toward him. I moved a chair and sat down opposite. "Same here," I said, looking at him. Nathan nodded. There was a short silence as Nathan stared at me. But he let out a sigh. "Keith told me what happened between you and Lena," he said. "He never told my father the truth, only that you sent her away due to her being young and wanted to claim something along the lines of that." I didn't say anything. Nathan stared at me. "Lena and I are friends," he said. "My father thought we were mates at one stage, but she flat out told him no." I gave him a small smile. Nathan looked at me, but his face changed slightly. "You know you're an AE for what you did to her," he said with a wave of slight anger slipping through him. I wanted to roll my eyes, but he needed to get this off his chest like the others. "Eli," he said, pulling me from my thoughts. "I don't know what you were thinking, but as long as you are true to her now, I will stand by you and Lena. Has she forgiven you yet?" I looked at him but sighed. "I think so," I said. "She rejected me before the fight, but I told her I wouldn't accept the rejection." Nathan nodded, but a slow smirk slid through the corners of his face. "I bet she was happy with that," he said, which made me snort. "You have no idea," I murmured. Nathan smirked. "Oh, I know Lena, she would probably have fought you," he said. I kept my mouth shut, there was no way of telling him what had happened. I cleared my throat and changed the subject quickly. "Have you found your mate?" I asked. Nathan looked at me and moved his head to the side. "I haven't," he said a little too quickly. "I guess Lena didn't tell you about me." I stared at him and shook my head. Nathan looked at me, but his eyes wandered around the room. He leaned toward me. "If this gets out," he whispered, "I know it was you. Only a handful of people know about this, and they swore they not to." I placed my finger on my lips and nodded. "I won't say anything," I whispered. "You can trust me." Nathan looked at me, trying to work out whether to trust me or not. "I would never tell anyone's secrets unless I think it benefits the pack, but not personal ones." After a few minutes went by, Nathan stared at me and sighed. "I'm gay," he whispered. I raised my eyebrows at him but didn't say anything. I knew I wouldn't say anything to anyone as it was not my story to tell. He clearly hasn't told his father. Nathan looked at me and moved his head to the side. "You won't tell," he started to say, but I shook my head, making him cut his sentence off. "No, I won't," I said. "That's your story to tell, not mine." Nathan smiled. After a few moments, he let out a snort. "Lena knows," he said. I stared at him, confused. Nathan shook his head, and the corners of his lips curled. "She hasn't told anyone, I was just remembering how she found out." "How did she?" I asked, finding his grin go wider. He looked like he wanted to laugh. Well, I have a secret hiding place where I would meet my lover, it's a cove, he said and leaned into the chair. Lena had taken me there before, she said it was her favorite spot when she needed to think. I was with someone, and we were getting hot and heavy. Lena went into the cove as she was going there to think and caught us. Nathan let out a laugh. Her face was a picture, he said. I couldn't help but chuckle. I could imagine Lena's face. She would have either blushed or wouldn't know where to look. She walked out of the cove and even fell, trying not to look behind at her. I laughed, and so did Nathan. Once we both calmed down, Nathan looked at me and smiled. I cleared my throat. Does your father know? I asked, already knowing the answer. Nathan's face hardened as he shook his head. No, he said. Don't tell him. I held my arms up in surrender. I won't, I said. I promise. Nathan nodded. I stared at him. I guess his old man is one of the older types who wanted his son to have a woman who could bear his child. Alphas needed heirs, but there were ways and means to have a child these days. I have no problem with anyone being gay, I am happy for them as long as they are happy. Nathan cleared his throat. I guess you are going to train the pack members today, he said. Get as much in before Alpha Trevor comes. I nodded. I glanced to see where the Omega was, but she must have left the room while we were talking. She was an older woman, I never saw her go. I shook my head and looked back at him. Do you want to train with us? I asked him. Nathan smiled. Yeah, he said. I will return to my room and meet you at the training grounds in a few short moments. I smiled. Sure, I said. We don't know when this will start, but we can still prepare. Nathan nodded and got up from his chair. I will meet you at the training grounds in 15 minutes, he said. I nodded. Nathan smiled and walked away, heading out of the kitchen. I glanced at the Omega, who had come back in and was staring back at me. Do you want some food, Alpha? She asked. I nodded. The Omega turned around and started putting food onto a plate. Once she filled it, she turned around and placed it in front of me. Usually, we would all eat in the grand hall, but I didn't want to be around anyone. I ate my food quietly. I had some coffee to wake me up too. Once I was done, I left everyone on the table and headed out the door toward the training grounds. As I approached closer, Nathan was there with Logan and Sophia. Logan looked up at me and gave me a small smile. He looked how I felt, he probably didn't sleep either. You okay? I asked as I got closer to him. Logan nodded. Yeah, he said. None of us slept. I think my father paced the flooring in the kitchen till it was worn out. Keith was with him. I nodded. I glanced at Sophia, but before I could say anything, I could smell blood on her. I stared at her, and her face hardened. Did you speak to Amber? I asked. Sophia nodded and looked at me. Oh, I spoke to her, she said with venom slipping past her lips. She had a lot to talk about when I was finished with her. I stared at her, confused, but a mind link opened up from Logan. Amber spoke about what I did with her, he said. Sophia lost it and tortured her. I looked over at him, and his face said it all. Eli, he said through the mind link, she scared me to death. I was about to speak when Sophia spoke out. I had to torture her, she said, making me look at her. I could feel Blaze move in my head. She told us the same thing to you, but we did find out that there was a spy in Alpha Gareth's pack. A growl came from behind. You what? Snarled Nathan. Did she give you a name? I looked at him, his eyes were yellow. His wolf was fighting for control. I looked back at Sophia. Did she tell you who? I asked. Sophia nodded. A girl called Anna, she said. My eyes widened. Isn't that, I thought, remembering the girl that sat next to me while I was hiding from Lena before her fight. What? Shouted Nathan, pulling me from my thoughts. I looked over at him and frowned. Who is she? I asked, not telling him I knew who she was. I wasn't going to go into great details about it. Nathan looked at me and sighed. You sure? He asked Sophia. But Sophia nodded. I'm certain, she said. Nathan sighed. I don't know how he got to her, he said. She doesn't like men, she is mated to a woman. I nodded. You need to get her in a cell, I muttered. Have someone interrogate her about all this. You can deal with her when you get back. Nathan nodded. We will, he said. The Gamma is looking after the pack while we are here, but why would she do that to Lena? I mean, she had a thing for her. I stared at him, and I could feel Blaze come closer to look, never saying anything. I had to push him back. He wanted answers, like yesterday. We will sort it out after training, I said, changing the subject as I glanced toward the side and noticed other pack members coming toward us. I looked back at Sophia and Logan. We will all go to the office, and you can tell us everything else, I said. They both nodded. I looked at Nathan. We will all go there, I said to him, trying to make sure he would drop the subject. I knew I needed to tell my pack about the upcoming attack with Alpha Trevor. Nathan nodded. I moved away and headed to the front, where all the pack members were. Everyone get ready, I shouted. We all need to train today. Everyone moved into position and stood in front of me. I glanced around and spotted Alpha Dean walking toward me. We need to prepare, and I know I have to warn the rest of the pack about the depending attack from Alpha Trevor. It will have to wait till after the training. I was going to train everyone hard and longer today. Chapter 60. Alpha Trevor. I stared at the Midnight Eclipse pack. My wolf was restless. He wanted blood, and he wanted Eli's head and mate as much as I did. Killing our mate was our best decision, we wanted the best, not a weak human. I could hear someone behind me. Boss, calls a man, a rogue. I grunted. What? I shouted as I turned to look at him. The rogue stared at me. When do we go in? He asked. We have been waiting on the sidelines for 2 days. We want what you owe us. I wouldn't say I like these filthy mutts, their stench alone affects my senses, but I needed them. He growled as I stepped closer, but I couldn't help but smirk. Listen here, rogue, I sneered. We will go in when I say. I pay you, and you work for me, or don't you remember? I stepped closer. You will listen here, a stupid piece of crap, I grunt as I use my speed and slam him into the ground, gripping his neck with my hand and growling. We will go in when I say. I need everything in place, and you are to listen to me. The rogue spluttered as my hand squeezed tighter. I knew his pathetic group of followers was watching on, but I needed them to know who was boss, and it certainly was not him. Now, get out of my sight and tell my sister I need her here, I snickered into his face. I squeezed more slightly but let go and moved away from him as quickly as possible. I looked around and growled loudly. We will be leaving soon, I grunted for all to hear. I heard movement, like people running. I sighed. I moved back into position and stared back at the pack. My father would be so proud. He wanted to take over this pack years ago and the others. He had a good plan using women but was stupid enough to use his pack members. I alternated his plan to my use, and I knew if I used pack members, everyone would know. My father was a fool, but he had his uses before he was taken away from me. All those alphas worked out everything and sent him away to be killed, and now I am finishing what he started. Eli had everything handed to him on a silver platter from his father and never had to work for anything to be the alpha he needed to be, same with Alpha Dean. They took over their packs with their father's guidance, not mine. No, I had to learn from my father's Beta and Gamma, who followed my father's law down to a T. They made me the man I am today, even the monster they knew I could be. When I took over, my pack members thought they were getting a scared child, but I showed them. Some members tried to overrule me, but I scared all pack members into submission by killing the ringleader. My father loved women from the pack more. If he liked one, he would kill their mates and have them till they submitted to him. Many were killed, but ones loved the thought of being with him as he promised them the world. I watched how he treated my mother, but I never cared about her. She thought she protected me from my father, but she was wrong. I watched him torture the women. He told me I had to learn how to be a man and learn from his mistakes. My mother died at my father's hands, and no one knows except me as I was forced to watch what he did to her. Every time he was with another woman, he made her be in excruciating pain. I didn't care. Standing here for the last 24 hours watching the pack has made me realize what kind of alpha Eli and Dean are, and I must admit, they are well respected but also stupid. I wanted Luna Stephanie and everything they had, and knowing she was in the pack made it all worthwhile. I want their Lunas, and I want it all. Boss, called a woman's voice, another rogue as she stepped closer. I looked over my shoulder and stared at her. She was the one that was in my bed last night. She knows how to please a man, using that mouth of hers. What? I said as I turned to face her. She smiled. Everyone will be in position soon, she said as she walked over to me and placed her arm around my neck. Her mouth was close to mine as I looked down at her. We have some time for fun, or can we FK after in the alpha's bed? And I close my eyes as I keep going. I don't care about any of my mistresses, but one woman Eli's mate. I imagined what I would do to her. The firecracker can swing a mean right hook and knows how to fight, which will be handy, but she will be submitting to me. My sister ensures me she will, that's what I am having her deal with her. I thrust into the she-wolf's mouth more and let out a low grunt as I shot my cum down the back of her throat. As she sucks me dry, she moves and stands up, wiping the sides of her mouth with her fingers. I will get into position alpha, she said as she kissed me. I kissed her back briefly but pulled back, pulling my pants and boxers together. The she-wolf smiles and walks away. I turn back around and stare at the pack. I knew I had to kill Eli and Dean. I wanted their packs. I wanted their mates. I wanted everything they had and to be more powerful than any alpha known to man. I wanted what my father never had. I heard footsteps and looked over my shoulder as my beta approached me. He's the only primary pack member here, everyone else is on lockdown and in cells. I got my gamma, and a few rogues left behind. I couldn't let any of them expose what I got planned. I only had a few members who believed in my father's beliefs, and they are helping too, keeping all the rogues in check. When do we leave? Kai asked as he stood next to me. This evening, I said as I turned to look at him. I gave them plenty of time to get ready, but I know Alpha Gareth only brought a few men, and so did Alpha Dean. Kai nodded. Once we take over Alpha Eli's pack, we go after the others, I said. We will use all rogues and members from our and Eli's pack to fight. Kai frowned. What if the rogues change their mind, he said. What if the pack members from Alpha Eli's pack don't agree to join ours? I grinned. Oh, Kai, I said as I placed my hand on his shoulder. They will if they want to live. Besides, Lena is their Luna, they will follow her, and the same goes with Alpha Dean's pack. Kai stared at me but didn't say anything. Have you heard from Amber and the others? I asked as I moved my hand from his shoulder. Kai shook his head. No, he said. I tried ringing her phone, but it goes straight to answer phone. I wonder if Eli has her, I thought. She won't be that stupid to get caught, surely, not with her mate in my cells. I looked over to the pack and sighed. Is my sister back? I asked. I could hear Kai turn, so I knew he was also looking back at the pack. Your sister is one sick twisted BH, he said, not answering my question. I couldn't help the smile that formed on my face. My father had to have another child with one of those mistresses and even sent her to Alpha Frank's pack. He was stupid and never asked any questions about the father, which was dumb. I didn't know Naomi for years until she found out about me. I was surprised but intrigued to learn about her, even though I didn't care. I wanted Eli and Dean gone, but when she mentioned that Eli had found his mate early and that she knew who she was, I needed more information about her. Naomi was excited that I wanted to know, but my plan was forming in my head while she told me everything she did to her when she was in the pack, and I was quite frankly surprised. I never thought I would find out that my sister was sick and twisted like me. My sister doesn't realize that Eli needs to be dead. Naomi wanted Eli, and I told her she could have him. He would never take her as his mate, he is too invested in Lena, and that's what the mate bond is supposed to do. I'm hoping someone will kill her before I get my claim on the land, but you never know. I might even keep Eli locked up in my cells and make him feel everything I do to Lena. I shook my thoughts back as I turned to look at Kai, who was still staring at the pack. Where is my sister? I asked, making him look at me. He frowned. She told me to tell you that she will leave Eli's mate alone for now as she had too much fun with her. Her wolf's not present, so it will take a while for her to heal. I frowned. I know I told her to get her to submit, but I hope she hasn't scarred her too much as I want to FK her. Kai looked at me for a moment. You know your sister's wolf hasn't come out at all, he muttered. You think that she may cause more problems for us? I stared at him. I was wondering the same thing. Naomi's wolf took over her body for 5 years while Lena went to her uncle's pack. I only found out about it through Amber, as she told me that Naomi seemed to be a lot nicer to people than she would ever be. Hearing that, I knew it was her wolf had taken over. I had to rethink other plans and put them in place. It was only a matter of time before her wolf would come forward and do more damage to this whole thing. I think we will be fine, I said. I know her wolf still wants her mate, so I had one of the girls bring him here before we started. No one knows about it. Kai smiled. You think that will work? He said. I nodded. We all know that she-wolves never do anything that can cause harm to their mates, I sneered. Kai grinned, but his mind went blank. After a few moments, he came back, and his grin widened. They are training, he said. It seems like a normal thing. I smirked. I told our lookout to come back, he said. We don't know what will happen once they are done. I smiled. Don't worry, I said. They don't have many pack members, and we have time. We will be attacking sooner than I planned. Make sure all rogues are in place, I said. Get ready. I will mind link you when we are attacking. Kai nodded. Eli trained his pack members like a military operation without fail. I want them all at their weakest. I want them to be prepared, not because they will fight, but because they will all die at my hands without help from other packs. I could feel my wolf come closer. She will be ours, he snickered as drool slipped from his mouth. The plan is to kill all pack members, and then Eli, then make his mate submit to us. My wolf howled as we stared out toward the pack. Won't be long now. I will have what I want, and no one can stop me. Chapter 61. Eli. I trained everyone for 2 hours. Blaze was lying in my head, panting. Now, I shouted. That's the end of training. Everyone stopped. Some huffed out and collapsed on the ground, while others started to walk away, talking. We need to tell them about that stupid Alpha, Blaze muttered in my head. I knew he was right. I looked back at them, and I knew I had to prepare them for the war that was coming. Before you all go, I shouted, which made everyone stop what they were doing and look at me. As you all know, Lena still hasn't been found, I said. Many people were mumbling, but I carried on talking. I have some information that will become a shock, but we only found out about this information a few hours ago. Pack members stopped talking, and all gave me their undivided attention. We got information that Alpha Trevor is targeting us, and he will be attacking us, I said. Pack members started to voice their concerns. What? One member shouted. Why? Another yelled. All questions you can think of were flying at me, which wasn't helping me control Blaze, who wanted to be let out. I was having a hard time controlling Blaze. We both wanted Lena back, and we were finding it hard to concentrate on everything. I glanced to the side and noticed Sophia, Logan, and Nathan were watching on. Quiet, I yelled. I could feel Blaze let a low growl in my head, but I ignored him. I know you all have questions, I said. Alpha Trevor has infiltrated our pack with spies. We don't know what he is after, but he has been after my mate when she was at Alpha Gareth's pack, even telling people she was his mate. A few growls erupted, but I carried on. We were told he will attack this pack soon, I said. We need to be prepared for what comes. We need to ensure everyone who can't fight needs to be placed in the pack house. Luna Stephanie will be waiting outside for all children and the elderly in the next few hours. I don't want to take any chances. Everyone nodded. I want you all to be prepared and stay close to the pack house, I said. I want us all to be ready for when he comes, and no one leaves the pack. Everyone stay safe. I looked toward them and motioned everyone to leave. We need to get mate, whimpered Blaze. I could sense everyone was anxious and scared about what was about to come. I could only tell them what we all knew, which wasn't much. I sighed as I turned. I noticed Sophia, Logan, and Nathan walking over to me. I looked between them. We need to place more people on patrol, I said. We need to figure out where Alpha Trevor is. Logan nodded. I will arrange for more patrols around the territory. Once everyone who can't fight is inside the pack house, he said. I think we should look into the human town which is close by. I stared at him, but he sighed. Alpha Trevor has told all these women different versions of what he wants, but no one knows the truth, he said. I frowned. What do you mean? I asked. Nathan cleared his throat. I had a mind link from the Gamma back at our pack, he said. He placed Anna into a cell, and she started to talk straight away. Anna told him that a man approached her and asked her to look out for Lena. I raised my eyebrows, but Nathan carried on. Anna said that the guy was worried about Lena as there was trouble at the pack when she was here, he said. How would Alpha Trevor know about what happened to Lena? Asked Sophia. Nathan looked back at her with slight confusion. What happened to Lena here? He asked. Naomi, that's what Logan said as he looked between us. Naomi must be working for him. I knew I had to tell Sophia and Logan everything we learned about Naomi and Alpha Trevor. I think we should go back to the office, I said. I don't want other pack members to hear about this. Everyone looked around and nodded. I trust my members, but we know a few more people would return to Alpha Trevor. I just needed to figure out who else was on his radar. I turned around and headed toward the pack house with everyone following behind. We walked into the office, where we found Alpha Gareth, Alpha Dean, my father, Tim, and Keith waiting for us. I walked to the desk and sat down while the others took seats around the room. I could feel Blaze move closer to the surface but never show himself. Has anyone found out where Alpha Trevor is? I asked. No one said anything, only shook their heads. We needed to know where he was. I sighed. Is Luna Stephanie waiting for all the pack members who can't fight to come in? I asked, looking at Alpha Dean. Yeah, said Alpha Dean. Most pack members are on their way, she mind-linked me moments ago. 3 members of my pack are waiting with her. I nodded and looked at Sophia and Logan. I need to tell you everything we know about Naomi and Alpha Trevor, I said. I explained everything that I remembered. After 20 minutes, Sophia looked pissed, and so did Tim, Keith, and Logan. They not too happy about all this, muttered Blaze as he looked through my eyes. You mean to tell me that BH and Alpha are siblings, growled Tim, pulling me from my thoughts. How didn't we know about the birth father? His eyes went to my father, who was staring back at him. Why didn't you ask her? He asked. I looked at my father, his face was hardened. What are you suggesting? My father snarled back. Tim was about to open his mouth, but I had enough. Everyone is accusing everyone, all because of one man and his sister. Enough, I shouted. Tim glared at my father, but my father looked at me. We all need to remember who the enemy is, I said. We don't need to fight with each other. What happened in the past needs to stay in the past. We need to be prepared for whatever Alpha Trevor brings us. The office was silent. I looked toward everyone. We need to ensure the pack is secure before he comes, I said. Eli, called Alpha Gareth, making me stop and look at him. We will help, he said. We all know what needs to be done. I looked at him but didn't say anything. Everyone misses mate like us, Blaze murmured. We need our head in the game. Mate can look after herself, and she will return to us. I didn't know whether to believe him or not, but I knew I had to get my head back in the game. I had an alpha to kill and a mate to get back. Chapter 62. Eli. We didn't stay too long in the office. The conversation stayed the same, and even a few apologies were made. Tim and my father shook hands before we left. We needed to ensure everyone was prepared, and all the pack members who couldn't fight were safe within the pack house. The pack was busy as everyone was making sure everything was ready. I was helping Alpha Dean, my father, and Luna Stephanie. I knew we had a bunker but never thought of it being able to hold people in it. My father had shown us where it would be safe for the members who couldn't look after themselves. Luna Stephanie ensured all elderly, pregnant she-wolves and children were in a bunker at the back of the pack house. Luna Stephanie kissed Alpha Dean as she was the last member to go in. Once the door was closed, he walked over to me and looked pissed. We need to make sure we kill Trevor, he muttered. Either you or I will, he needs to be stopped. I planned to, I snarled. Whenever an image of Alpha Trevor entered my head, Blaze and I would get angry. We needed to get him, but dead or alive all depended on if Lena was with him. Part of me wished she was, so I knew she was okay. But the other part didn't. I didn't want to see her in the state she was in the photograph. I couldn't handle it. We will get her back, growled Blaze. I will kill every single wolf that is out there. I knew he would. I looked at Alpha Dean and was about to say something, but a mind link came through from Logan. They are here, he growled out in my head. We need to move, I said as I turned to walk away. They are here. I started to move quickly through the pack house. All pack members were getting into positions. As I got to the front door, I spotted Logan standing with Keith, Tim, and Sophia. They were all looking ahead. As I approached, the stench of rotten eggs wafted toward me, making me want to gag. Blaze was up on all paws, growling. I want them all, he roared. Let me out. I ignored him, stopped next to Logan, and glanced at my friend. I want them dead, he growled, not looking at me. He took my sister, Eli. I want her back. Logan turned his head and looked at me. He was holding so much, but everything was heightened due to what was happening. I wasn't the best brother back in the day, he muttered as he stared at me. Both of us did her wrong. Right now, we get her back, and we both grovel for forgiveness. I could feel the hurt in his voice. We may not have known what was happening back when Lena was in the pack, but we did cause most of the problems for her and the people around her, even if we were too blind and stupid to see it happening. I know I have a way to go with Lena in making it up to her, and I will. Now we get mate, said Blaze as I looked back at him. No more pity party for you, become the alpha and mate she needs. I nodded and looked back at Logan, who was still staring at me. I didn't say anything but glanced behind him to see Keith staring at us. Like the rest of Lena's family, his face was holding so much. We will kill everyone who steps foot in this pack, he said as he walked up and placed his hand on Logan's shoulder, giving him a slight squeeze. If Lena is there with him, we will free her. What if she is not with him? Asked Tim. Where will we search for my baby? I could hear the pain in his voice at the nickname he gave Lena. He was defeated, but I knew he would do anything to get Lena back. We will search everywhere, Keith said, pulling me back. Lena knows how to fight and will kill if she needs to. As for finding her, we will search his pack and everywhere he has been. He must have her somewhere. I nodded. Keith is right, I said. We will do everything to get her back. But first, we must deal with what is in front of us. We need to kill Alpha Trevor or capture him to find out answers. I know I can't promise him to be alive as Blaze wants to use him as his next chew toy, but we will figure it all out when it comes. All three nodded. I glanced toward Sophia, who was staring ahead. Logan looked at her and sighed. She wants her back just as much as we do, he mutters. She wants to talk after all this. I stared at him, but his face was stern. Not the time or place, he said, shaking his head. I nodded. I knew it wasn't, but knowing Logan through the years as I have, he never talks about anything. He would let it rot more till it became a problem. They are here, says Sophia as I look up and look at where she was looking. In the distance were loads of men and women standing on the outskirts of the forest. More rogues appear around, and many are behind them. It was hard to work out how many there were. It was nerve-wracking as we didn't know how many would come, and judging on the scene in front of me, this would be one attack that could break my pack in more ways. There had to be over 1,000 rogues, more even. Growls erupted around me from pack members as rogues appeared around the forest clearing. I glanced around and noticed everyone was in position, but the worry and fear that came from them suffocated me. I couldn't help but listen to all the murmurs around us. "There are too many," muttered a few. "We are not going to survive," someone else sneered. I growled and turned to face everyone. Everyone went quiet as I scanned the faces that stood before me. "Listen up," I yelled. "I know there seems to be more of them than us, but we have trained every day for years to deal with these situations. We will come out on top of this stronger." I glanced around, taking in everyone. People's faces hardened. "We will take these mutts down, and we will become the pack we are meant to be," I yelled. "We are not just fighting to save the pack, we are fighting for it and the people who are unable to. People that you may love, who will come out of this and find out that there will be a new era for our pack, but also the most feared. We will take everyone down." People nodded, and fear was replaced with determination. "The pack link is open if anyone needs help," I said. "Use it, we are all in this together." The pack link opens, and everyone's emotions hit me like a tidal wave, hard and fast. I cleared my mind as Blaze came forward. "We kill them," he says. "We kill them and get made back." I let Blaze come forward as we join as one. I turned to look back at the rogues. There seemed to be more there from when I last looked. But as I scanned the faces till my eyes landed on the one person who started all of this. Alpha Trevor. Alpha Trevor stepped out and was accompanied by his beta. I looked over to Logan, who was staring at them. I opened a mind link to him, and only him. His beta is with him. "Can you tell if there are others from his pack?" I asked. Logan didn't say anything for a few seconds and let a low growl out. "I can spot some, but not all the pack members are here," he snarls. "His gamma is not here either. He must have kept them all back or something." I growled as my eyes locked onto Alpha Trevor, who was smirking. "I can't see Lena," Logan says through the mind link. "Where is she?" I scanned the crowd, but Logan was right, there was no sign of Lena. "Naomi's not there either," muttered Keith, standing next to me. I growled. After what felt like hours, Alpha Trevor roared as his eyes bore back into mine. "Attack!" he yelled, and all rogues behind him started running toward us. There was a massive band of them. If I would have guessed, there were definitely more than 1,000 of them. I watched as human and wolf forms moved forward. "Now, Blaze!" and I shouted as I charged forward. Pack members growl out, and all follow me right into the abyss. Chapter 63. Lena. I struggled against the chains, trying to get free, but there was no use. Every time I moved, the chains dug into my skin more, causing more pain. The movement outside where I was being held was loud, it sounded like many footsteps running away. I glanced at the doorway, but no one came inside. I sighed and glanced back. There was still no sign of Bex. I needed her back, I needed her to help me. I couldn't think of a plan to kill Naomi, but I might have to wing it when it comes. I knew I could take her, but it was all depending on where her head was at. Movement came from the doorway, pulling me back to look. As I glanced around, Naomi was standing by the door. She stared at me, looking pissed. I could tell she was muttering to herself. Something was wrong. Naomi looked at me and snarled. "We have to go," she shouted. I didn't say anything. Naomi walked toward the gate and pulled it open, stepping inside. I didn't know if I was strong enough to take her. Naomi looks at me and walks toward a lever, kicking it. I don't see it coming as I fall to the ground on my knees, and my hands land on the floor. I grit my teeth as pain shoots through my kneecaps, but I use my hands to steady myself. "Move!" screams Naomi. "We need to leave now." I looked up as Naomi grabbed the chains and yanked them toward her, making me fall on my face. I groaned out, but I got up. I know if I don't do something soon, she could flick more pain on me. I use what strength I have and get up onto my legs. I stagger toward her as she pulls me more with the chains. Using the pain radiating from where the chains were rubbing into my wrists, I grit my teeth. I might be in a lot of pain, but I knew I needed to move and know where we were. Naomi didn't utter a word, the only thing she was doing was pulling me and muttering. I couldn't help but overhear the muttering coming from her. "Stupid mutt," she muttered as she dragged me out of the cell, through the gate, and out the doorway. We walked through a corridor that had windows on either side. I couldn't help but look around, and I had a funny feeling about where I was, and I knew I wasn't far from the pack. As Naomi opened a door in front of her, the light from outside blinded me. Naomi stepped outside and yanked me again, which made me stumble due to my inability to see. I land with a thud on my knees as I blink away the brightness, which hurts my eyes. Once the blurriness went, I knew where I was. There was a small hut once used for hunters back in the day, no one knew about it, and it was old. But it was something many kids would use to hook up with someone back in the day, and it wasn't too far from the pack. "Get up!" yells Naomi, who kicks me in the side. I grunt out as I land on my side. Naomi was still holding the chains. An idea came into my head. I could use them. I waited, but something hit me again, but this time, it hit my face hard. I grunt out as blood comes out of my mouth as I spit it out. I looked at Naomi, grinning back at me. "I might have to keep you tortured for a while, but my brother is so stupid thinking I would let you live," she says. I looked at the chain in her hand. I know she didn't use the chain when she punched me. "I will kill you," she yells at me. "Eli will be mine." The mere mention of Eli has my heart aching. I knew the mate bond was in full effect, but I generally care about him. My feelings back then were always there. I had a lot of time to think while being tortured. Eli sent me away to help Blaze. What happened back then was moreover what the she-wolves were doing to me. I didn't believe in having a chance with Eli, he never showed that he was into me that way. I knew I wanted to be with him. I wanted more than anything to get back to him right now. Naomi clenches her fist, but as she draws it back, her face goes blank, and her eyes change. "Now little wolf," came a voice. Naomi's voice changed, it was Elle. I knew I had to move fast. I used the chain, pushed Naomi to the ground, and punched her face as her eyes returned to Naomi. "Stupid wolf," she shouts, but I move. Staggering to my feet, I wrap the chain around my knuckles as quickly as possible and turn my hand into a fist. I use the chain and pull it hard toward me, making Naomi come hurtling toward me. I punch her in the face again, which makes her groan. I don't stop the attack on her as I keep punching her till Naomi falls back on the ground, covered in blood. I move quickly and straddle over her, with the chain still wrapped around my knuckles. I knew we were both bleeding, but it was hard to tell where the blood was coming from and where the chains were. I used the strength I had that seemed to find its way somehow back to me and hold Naomi in place. "You won't have Eli," I sneered near her as I leaned toward her face. "He's my mate." I loosen my hand on the chain and wrap it around Naomi's neck. Naomi tries to move, but I use all my weight to keep her in place as the chain goes around her neck. "Lena," she says, I could tell she was frightened, but I knew she was messing with my head. Naomi was like that with everyone, getting her way. I knew what I had to do, and I believed her wolf over anything she had to say. No wolf would wish for death. Please, she begged. I ignored her as the chains were in place. I looked into her eyes, but her eyes changed to L's. Now, she whined. I guess she was having trouble holding Naomi back. I pull the chain, which tightens around Naomi's neck. I pulled with everything I had, which was not much due to what Naomi put me through. Naomi moved underneath me, her hand gripping my legs as her nails dug deep into my flesh, but nothing was going to stop me. Naomi gasps, but her eyes turn to L. Thank you, she gasps as her body stops moving underneath me as I pull harder, which causes her neck to snap. After a few seconds, I drop the chains and stare at her lifeless eyes of Naomi. I killed her. I killed the person who caused most of my pain growing up. My head hurt, but I knew I had to move. Someone would find me. I looked up and noticed there was no one around. I slowly moved up and away from Naomi's body, and my eyes fixed on her. As I get my bearings, I look over my shoulder toward the forest clearing. I needed to get out of here. I needed to get to the pack. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I needed to return. If Naomi were supposed to move or kill me, I would have been back in the pack grounds in 5 minutes, 15 with my injuries. I moved my eyes from Naomi's dead body and moved toward the forest clearing, staggering toward it, and using the rest of my energy to get back my pack. As I got closer, the stench of rotten eggs hit me hard, and I wanted to do was throw up. Once I shook my head, I breathed through my mouth, so I didn't have to smell them. Rogues were here, so that meant they were at my pack, which made a low growl escape my lips. I needed to get there quickly. I used everything I had to walk toward the stench. All I knew was I had to get to the pack fast. Chapter 64. Eli. The stench of blood fills the air, it makes it rotten to the core. Everyone was either injured or dead. Death has a horrible smell too, which I was met with as I killed every rogue that came at me. Blaze and I stayed together, never letting his shift as we used our combined strength to take everyone down. Blaze wanted out, but I didn't want him to have all the fun. I wanted to be part of this, so we came up with being one. It worked better, due to being an alpha and Blaze's strength and mine. We took out everyone who came at us with a flick of his claws. Every pack member, whether in human or wolf form, fought and showed bravery. More rogues came, and we fought, but every so often, I could feel a pack member lose their life. I could feel it through the pack link. I wanted to protect everyone, but I knew I couldn't. I was only one man and wolf. I needed to stop this attack, and I knew how by killing the man who started it all. I ripped another wolf apart but looked around and spotted Logan, who was in wolf form. He was fighting 2 wolves while Sophia was in human form, killing another with a knife. I quickly shifted my focus and looked around when my eyes landed on Nathan and his father, Alpha Gareth, who were fighting more rogues than I could count. It felt like we were being separated, but something told me something would happen soon. I watched as more rogues came toward me, but instead of attacking me, they started to circle me. There had to be 10 men, all growling. It looked like Alpha Trevor picked the largest men he knew to fight me. I growled, but one man decided to lunge at me. I quickly use my speed and R*P out his throat as soon as I grip his neck. Blaze and I weren't playing with them, we wanted them gone. We wanted to get to Lena. I kept up the fight between all 10, and after killing everyone, I glanced around and spotted my father with Alpha Dean. Both men were in their wolf forms and killing every rogue that came toward them, but I noticed they were being pushed back as they did with Nathan and Alpha Gareth. I looked around when my eyes landed on Keith, who ripped out a wolf's heart. His back was against another, which was hard for me to see. But a few seconds later, the other person came around before I looked away. It was Tim. I never thought about fighting like that before. I was about to move when a roar rippled through the air, making me look. My eyes landed on Alpha Trevor, who was stalking toward me. I looked around and noticed rogues had me surrounded again. They formed a big circle around me. Blaze growls. I could feel him wanting out, but something hit me on the head, making me stumble forward. I don't know what it was, but I landed on my knee. I growled. I try to move, but rogues use that moment to attack and pin me down. Blaze roars out, letting our aura slip past, but it doesn't affect any rogues. That never happened before, but I guess they follow Alpha Trevor. Feet and fists were hurling toward me as I was pushed down. How was I going to get out of this? I want out, growled Blaze. I could feel hands pulling me up as I was forced onto my knees. I looked like a begging man, even though I wasn't. I look up and realize that 9 fully grown men are holding me back as Alpha Trevor walks toward me. Well, look at what I got, he grins as he steps in front of me and stares. Shame my mate is not here to witness this, he murmurs, which causes Blaze and I to growl out. She's not yours, I say through clenched teeth, moving to get free, but nails dig into my body as the men try to hold me in place. Alpha Trevor laughed. She is mine, he says as he calms himself down like he had told a joke. Your mate is mine, and so is your pack. Everything you have is now mine. You can't stop me. Alpha Trevor moves closer toward me as I struggle against the rogues. I don't know what smells worse, the rogues or the blood. Everyone holding me was covered in blood from pack members they had fought against moments earlier. Tell your pack members to stand down, Alpha Trevor called out. Let them choose to be free and be with a better alpha than you. Murmurs were sweeping through the pack link. Don't surrender Alpha, they yell. We would rather die than be part of his pack. I felt every pack member fight through whatever they were doing. I knew I had to fight back. I knew I had to be their alpha, the alpha they truly needed. They will never follow you, I say to him. Alpha Trevor smirks. Very well, he says and looks around. Kill them all. I growl loudly. Alpha Trevor turns and looks back at me, his eyes changed into his wolves. My wolf has been dreaming about this day for years, he says as he shifts into his wolf. I could feel nails digging into me more as I tried to move, but the more I tried, the more it felt like more men were holding on to me. This is the only way Alpha Trevor and his wolf can kill me. I will give them everything I have before they finish me off. I need to get out of these god rogues' hold. I moved more, but they tightened more. I growl. Blaze tries to push forward and comes up with me, using everything we have. Alpha Trevor's wolf inches closer to me. I growl, but a scent wafts toward me, which makes me stop moving. It can't be. Where was she? I watch in slow motion as Alpha Trevor's wolf stops in his track as a giant blob of white lands in front of us. I knew who it was. Her scent was everything that Blaze and I were craving. Bex and Lena. She was growling loudly, baring her teeth at the gigantic black wolf in front of her. Blaze and I stood with the rogues, gaping at the white wolf. Some let go of me as I felt less of them. The stench of fear washed over them. I knew I could use this as my chance, but her scent wafted over to me as I stared. I could make out marks on through her fur. She was injured, but I couldn't tell how bad. Mate, shouted Blaze in my head, pulling me back from my thoughts. Blaze, I said. Let's get these STS off us now. Blaze knew what I wanted to do as he started to shift. I looked up as I watched Alpha Trevor's wolf charge toward Bex and Lena. He would kill them. I growl out as I let Blaze take over. The rogues were too busy staring at Bex and Lena as we used our strength and pushed them all off us. I stood up as Blaze shifted into his proper form. Blaze stood up and let out a roar, letting our aura slip through. The only way we can defeat these arseholes is to do it in his form. I knew who we would kill, and judging by how Bex fought with Alpha Trevor, she would do the same. I charged toward them, but rogues came at me, but Blaze took them out with every moment he knew how. I needed to get to Bex, and I needed to do it now. Chapter 65. Lena. I stagger through the forest. Most of my injuries slowly healed, but the pain radiated through the ones still on show. I followed the stench of rotten eggs. The stench was everywhere. I couldn't figure out how many there were, but judging by the footprints on the ground, there had to be over 100, maybe more. I moved between each tree, pushing off each one and moving to the next one, needing support. I felt weak. No food would do that to you. I walked further into the forest but slowly started to realize where I was, the north side, not far from the pack house. I needed to tell someone about Naomi's body and where to find it. An image of her body came flooding back harshly, and I felt sick but also some relief. The girl gave me hell for years till I left the pack, but killing someone was never my intention. I would never have done it, but she never gave me an option and her wolf Elle was adamant. The thought of Elle saddened me. She was willing to die for her happiness. A wolf should never have to choose as Elle did. My thoughts went to Bex. I missed her. I missed her voice of reason and thinking about what she would think about the whole thing. I leaned on a tree as I closed my eyes. I sent a prayer up to the moon goddess, asking for forgiveness for killing Naomi and also to send Bex back to me. I knew I needed her. I didn't know what I was walking into when I returned to the pack. I opened my eyes, but as I looked around, a loud, piercing scream erupted throughout the forest. It sounded like a child. I pushed off the tree and moved quickly till I came close to where the scream came from. I stopped in my tracks as I watched 4 rogues, 3 in human form and 1 in wolf, stalk up toward a girl who seemed to be in her teens. They start to circle her. The fear radiated from her as she tripped over a branch and landed on her *S in front of them. "Look what we have here," said one of the rogues in human form. "Something we can have. I'm sure the alpha won't mind us taking one of the females for ourselves." I felt sick, but anger swept in as I stared at them. I needed to save the girl. I looked down and realized that I was covered in blood, but most of my wounds were healing. I looked back up and growled. "Get away from her," I shouted. All 4 men turned around and looked at me. The girl stared, fear clearly radiating off her, but her eyes went to mine and widened as she mouthed, "Luna." I stared at her but looked back at the men, not caring what came out of her mouth. "I am her Luna, I am Eli's mate, after all." "What do we have here?" asked one of the men, looking toward his friends. "Another toy to play with?" I growled. A rogue came toward me and lunged at me, but I sidestepped him and kicked him hard in the head with a spinning kick, sending him straight into a tree. I looked back at the others, who stood like lemons. I ran toward them, not caring what had happened to me. I use everything Uncle Keith taught me over the years at his pack. I used every kick, every duck, and punch to get to them. I could feel movement in my head, but I couldn't concentrate. I took out one rogue but ripped out his heart, and blood splattered all over me. I was about to get attacked by another, but the young girl shifted into her wolf and lunged at him, ripping his throat out. I looked at the last rogue, who looked worse for wear after the knockout he received from the tree. He growled and charged at me, but I moved out of the way as the young she-wolf took care of him. I landed hard on the ground as I tripped over something. I leaned up but felt weak. My body was failing me, and I was too exhausted to do anything as I lay down and closed my eyes. All I could hear was the young girl shifting back and yelling, "Luna!" My eyes were closed, but I felt a force pulling me back as a pair of eyes looked back at me. I knew those eyes. I missed those eyes. I could feel tears run down my face as I stared back at her. Bex was grinning. "Rest," she said. "You did good, Lena." With that, I felt my body shifting. Bex shifted into her proper form as I came closer to look through her eyes. I stared at the young girl, who was stunned but smiled. "Luna," she said with a bow. Bex nodded. "Let's find mate," she said. Bex trotted through the forest with the young girl, who shifted back into her wolf and followed behind us. We weren't that far from the clearing to the pack. We had no idea what we were getting into, but the stench of blood filled the air, which was not a good sign. I knew I had to talk to Bex before we did anything. "Bex," I called out. "I missed you." Bex laughed. "I missed you too," she said. "I must admit, I felt everything that BH did to you." I looked at her. "You felt it all?" I asked, more of a question than anything. Bex didn't say anything for a few seconds but sighed. "Lena," she said. "I will be honest with you, I felt it all, but I wasn't alone." I stared at her, but a frown formed. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, I wasn't alone," she said. "I mean, the moon goddess was with me. She told me that I had to wait till you needed me. She told me that you needed to deal with the human as the human's wolf asked for your help." The thought of Elle saddened me slightly, but knowing the moon goddess was there was something unheard of. She never interferes with anything that is regarding her wolves. "Well, I mean, there have never been any sightings or stories we were told over the years." "Lena," she called out, pulling me back to her. "I got this now, but when we need to kill that alpha, we need mate. I mean, we need to be with him." Bex looked back at me as she slowed her pace and came to a stop. I smiled. "I want Eli," I said. "I missed him too." Bex nodded, and her face softened. "I know," she said. "I felt that too." Bex looked back and trotted to the clearing, and stopped. I came closer and felt sick to my stomach as I stared out. The pack grounds were covered with bodies of wolves, rogues, and pack members. It was hard to work out if they were alive or dead. Our eyes scanned over what was happening, and Bex gave a low snarl. Rogues were circling the remaining pack members, separating them into sections. I noticed Alpha Frank, Alpha Dean, Nathan, and Alpha Gareth were in one circle, while all pack members were in a third with Logan and Sophia, trying to get through and get to the third circle. I looked at the circle closest to me. More than 8 men were holding one person. My heart clenched as I knew who it was. He wasn't in the other circles. Eli. My mate. There was no time to think as Bex started to charge, as a man began to walk into the circle toward Eli. Bex growls out. We knew who it was. I wanted that prick's head for what he had done to my pack. Bex sprinted toward the circle, and 2 rogues turned around as we got close, but we jumped over them all and landed right between Eli and Alpha Trevor, who had just shifted into his wolf. Bex doesn't think about it as we both know what to do as we attack his wolf, not giving him a second thought. We needed to keep Alpha Trevor's wolf busy so Eli could get free. Alpha Trevor's wolf snapped at us, but Bex went for him. She aimed for his legs and even jumped on him, digging her nails into his shoulder. His wolf was strong, but we were too fast for him. "Wear him out," I shouted as she lunged at him once more and bit his hind leg. A scent wafts toward us, which causes us to stop. We look up and spot Eli, who just took out 6 of the rogues that held him down. A shadow loomed over us, but as Bex went to turn around, Alpha Trevor's mouth gripped onto her side, causing her to howl loudly. The alpha dog's grip tightened as he lifted her, shook her hand, and threw Bex hurtling toward the side. We landed with a huge thud. I felt Bex shift back, whimpering. Pain radiated through me. I was back in human form, trying to get up. I glanced to the side, where the stupid mutt gripped us, and there in its place was a lot of blood spilling out of my side. I felt weak and could feel darkness sweep in harshly as I fell back, lying on the ground with my eyes beginning to close. Darkness overcame me, but I turned my head and spotted Eli on top of Alpha Trevor's wolf. My eyes close, and I stare back as Bex's eyes fall asleep. "Rest," she murmurs before she falls into a deep sleep. I could sense tiredness swooping in, and all I needed was to sleep. Chapter 66. Eli. I stare as Alpha Trevor's wolf throws Bex like a rag doll. He stokes toward her. Anger fills every fiber of my body, and Blaze growls out. "Mate," he snarls. Blaze comes forward once more, and we use all our strength to push off all the rogues. We used our speed and gripped each one that came at us, either squeezing the life out of them or ripping them apart. I stare ahead as I only have one focus, and that's getting to Bex before Alpha Trevor's wolf decides to use her as a chew toy. I watch as he stares at me. His wolf's eyes focus on me, but he looks back at Bex and sniggers as he walks toward her. "Oh no, you don't," I thought. "Blaze," I shouted. "Now." I pushed back and let Blaze take over, shifting into his form and ripping a rogue, shredding him apart with his claws. We start to charge toward Alpha Trevor's wolf, but 2 wolves jump in front of me. Blaze pushes off the ground and jumps, landing on Alpha Trevor's wolf back. Blaze sinks his teeth into his neck, and the big dog howls. Blaze sinks deeper, placing his claws deeper into his back. Blaze grips tighter, shaking the wolf hard. Blaze growls and snarls as the wolf tries to free himself, but nothing works. "Blaze *p out his throat," I yelled. Blaze uses his other paw and grips his neck, claws sinking into his neck. Once his nails are in, Blaze rips his throat and drops the dog's lifeless body. Blaze roars, letting our alpha aura slip through to let everyone know that Alpha Trevor is dead. Blaze growls loudly as he moves the dead body to the side and snarls as he stares back at the rogues. Rogues stop and stare, fear rolling off every single one of them. Blaze lets me take control, and I shift back into my human form. Anger fills my veins. Rogues start to run away as pack members try to catch some. "All pack members get them," I yelled. "No survivors. I didn't want no rogue to survive after what went down here today. All pack members follow the rogues." Some tried to surrender, but pack members weren't letting anyone live. The look on some pack members' faces was complete pain and anger. Some members were lost during this attack, and we all felt it. Pack members lost loved ones, all due to a madman and his desire to have whatever I had. I watched as the pack members ran. "Mate," whimpered Blaze in my head, pulling me back. I turned around and looked at where Bex had landed. But Bex wasn't there, a human was and a young girl who was checking on her. I ran over to her. "Lena." As I approached, the young she-wolf looked up at me. A tear ran down her cheeks. Alpha, she whispered as she looked back down. My eyes landed on Lena. She looked like Lena, but she was covered in loads of blood. Alpha, the young woman yelled, which pulled me from my thoughts as I went to my knees. I picked up Lena and noticed a big chunk of her side was gone, and blood was gushing out. Blaze whimpered in my head. The girl had something in her hand and placed it on Lena's wound. I looked at her. "Thank you," I whispered. The girl nodded. I picked Lena up and turned to run toward the pack hospital. I knew I had to get her there. I needed Lena to be okay, better even. But my mind was racing. Where did she come from? Maid tried to save us, muttered Blaze in my head, which made me remember how I managed to get free from all those rogues. They were stunned when a white wolf came to an alpha's aid. I ran all the way, but I could hear people behind me. I knew who it was. It must have been Tim, Logan, and Keith. I could feel a mind link trying to open up, but I ignored it. I needed to get Lena to the hospital and fast. I ran through the pack hospital doors as a doctor was waiting with a stretcher. "Alpha Eli," the doctor said. "Alpha Frank told me you would be bringing our Luna." I didn't say anything as I placed Lena on the stretcher. The pack doctor checked her over. He went to remove the cover that was placed over her wound, but more blood came out. "We need to move her," he yells, and everyone grips hold of the stretcher and starts to run. I followed them, but the pack doctor stopped me by placing his hand on my shoulder. "Alpha Eli," he said, looking at me. My eyes never met his, they were on the stretcher that was turning the corner. "I need to be with her," I blurted out. "Alpha Eli," called the pack doctor, which made me look at him. The doctor looks at me with a stern look, but it softens. "Alpha Eli," he said. "I need to go in there and stop that blooding, but I will come back with an update for you as soon as possible." I nodded. He went to move, but my feet followed him, making him stop me again. "Alpha Eli, you need to stay here, please," he said. I am about to move, but a hand goes to my shoulder and pulls me back. "Let him go to her son," Tim says in a strangled voice. The doctor looks back and nods. I stayed rooted to the spot as I watched him leave. As the doctor turns the corner, I look over my shoulder. Behind me were all the men in Lena's life, her brother, father, and uncle. Their faces were all full of concern. There was so much blood on her, remembering the state I saw her in. I turned around and walked past everyone, not saying a word. There was a waiting room, and I went in, out of sight. I needed to collect my thoughts and have some quiet. My head was racing with all the events that had happened. I didn't get to think as the door opened, and I walked to the others. "Eli," rasped out Logan, which made me look at him. His eyes were rimmed with tears. "Lena," was all he could say before the tears flowed. I turned and walked over to him, wrapping him in a brotherly hug that we had done many times over the years. I usually never hug people, but this was for Logan and me. I needed it. Logan pulled back and looked at me. "Where did she come from?" he asked. I shrugged. I looked at Tim and Keith, who had taken seats around the room. "Where's Sophia?" I asked as I turned back to Logan. Logan looked at me and sighed. "She's okay," he said. "She is being checked out as a rogue bit her." The last part came out more of a growl. I looked over at the men, but the mind link that I ignored came back to life. I sighed and opened it. It was my father. "Eli," he bellowed. "Don't ignore me." "How is she?" "I don't know," I said numbly and shook my head. "Where are you?" "Alpha Gareth got hurt during the attack," he said. Nathan and I are with him and walking back to the pack hospital. Alpha Dean has gone to get out all the pack members in the pack house. I sighed. Eli, once I have made sure Alpha Gareth is okay, I will pop by to see you, he said. But I will deal with the aftermath, you concentrate on Lena. I know you will want to be there when Lena wakes up. Hope flutters out as I think about Lena. My father closes the mind link down, and I walk to a nearby chair. I sat down and felt lost. Blaze moves in my head, which makes me look back at him. You, okay? I asked. Blaze looked at me, and his eyes were holding so much. I want, mate, he whispers, which sends my heart into a breaking mess. I can't lose her. Not like this. I lean back on the chair and close my eyes, sending a prayer. Please, Moon Goddess, I pleaded. Bring her back to me. Chapter 67. Eli. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. It felt like minutes had gone by, but I looked over to the others in the room, and they all had their eyes closed. I looked around, but there was no sign of the doctor. My mind and heart needed to know what was happening to Lena. I was pulled from my thoughts as the door to the waiting room opened, and in walked my father, with Sophia and the young girl from earlier. Any news? Asked my father, which made all the men in the room move up slightly. I shook my head, but my eyes went to the young girl. She looked no more than 14. The girl stared at me as a tear slipped down her cheek. This is Macy, said Sophia, which made me look at her. Sophia gave me a small smile as she placed her arm around Macy. Alpha Eli, I think you might want to know what Macy has to say, she said as she gave Macy's a slight squeeze. I looked back at Macy and nodded. I couldn't open my mouth as I was afraid of what my voice would sound like. Alpha, she said as she stared at me, but her eyes looked around the room at the others but back to me. I was behind the pack house. My family left me behind, I didn't know where they were. When the attack started, no rogues were coming from the back of the pack, and I thought I could hide. But I was wrong. I hid for a while, but 7 rogues emerged from the forest. I could hear them say they couldn't wait for someone to come any longer. I stared at her but never said a word. No one did. The girl sighs and carries on. I stayed out of sight, but I moved, which caught the attention of 4 rogues, she said with a shudder. I moved away from my hiding place and tried to run toward the forest, but they surrounded me when I tripped. After a few seconds, someone growled, and it was the Luna. My eyes widened at the mention of Lena. She was covered in blood and was in some pain, she said, but she fought in human form. I stared at her, confused. What do you mean in human form? I remembered that Bex had saved him, so why wouldn't she use Bex? Luna fought in human form, she took them all down with punches and everything you could think of, she said, sounding proud. That's my girl, muttered Keith. The girl looked at him but turned back to me. I helped once the rogues turned their attention on her, she said. My wolf was too scared to shift, but as soon as we knew it was the Luna, we knew we had to help her. I gave her a small smile. Once the rogues were killed, Luna fell on her side and looked like she was knocked out, but after a few seconds, her wolf shifted and ran to help you. Wow, I thought. It sounds like Bex wasn't there at the time, said Tim with a snarl. They must have used wolfsbane on her. I let a low growl out. I looked at the girl. Do you know which way the Luna came from? I asked. The girl nodded. The north side, she said. My mind raced as I tried to think about what was on the north side, but Logan growled. That's lie bh, he said as he shot up from the chair he was on and looked at me. The hunter's cabin, he gritted out. I stared at him, but something clicked. Years ago, a hunter's cabin was not too far from the pack. We never knew about it but stumbled on it when we were looking for a place to hold parties, but 6 years ago, after Lena left, my father told everyone that no one was allowed to go there, it was forbidden due to a child dying there. The photo Naomi took of Lena, I never placed it together as I was more focused on Lena and her injuries. But Lena was chained up, all I could see in the background was a wall behind her. The cabin was made out of wood back then. Over the last 6 years, no one from the pack ever went there, but clearly, people have been there over time and changed it. It had to be the hunter's cabin, and it was the only place we had never looked. I looked at Logan but turned to my father, who stared at me with a knowing look. Send men to the hunter's cabin, I said. Naomi must still be there. My father nodded. I knew what you were going to say and had already sent some guards there the moment Logan mentioned the cabin, he said. I nodded. The photo didn't look like a cabin, though, said Sophia. Have any of you been there since? We all shook our heads at her. Sophia frowned and looked at my father. How many cabins are not in the territory? She asked. My father stared at her blankly for a moment and sighed. I know of 3, he said as he looked at her. I had some pack members look for Lena at those, but there has been no one there. One was used with Naomi a few days or so ago, as a loyal friend told me before she killed him. Sophia nodded, but she looked at me. By the sound of it, she said as she looked between us. Naomi must have set up her meetings with Alpha Trevor or whoever in them. Ever since I came to this pack members were quick to tell me not to leave the territory, but they did tell me about the hunter's cabin in the north and never to go there. She looked over to Logan. You said a child died there, she said. Logan nodded. My mind never thought about it, it was still on Lena. Blaze was quiet, but he took in everything everyone was saying. Mate wasn't far from us, he said as a low growl slipped out. Blaze and I never go north. A child died in the hunter's cabin. He fell through the flooring that was loose and broke his neck. My father found him when his parents told him their child was missing. No one thought about the cabin, as all the older children used it to hook up, but my father went there and found him. My father made a law within the pack for no one to step foot in the cabin again. He was planning to tear it down, but along the way, it was forgotten about as we were suffering attacks or helping other packs with issues. I was about to say something when the door opened, and the noise of the hospital filled the room. Alpha Dean and Luna Stefine walked in, closing the door behind them. The pack hospital sounded overcrowded outside the door. Alpha Dean looked at me, but his eyes were holding so much. I have sent word to my pack to come here and help with the cleanup, he said. Nathan has done the same too. How is Alpha Gareth? Asked Keith, who stood up from his chair. Alpha Dean looked at him and sighed. No news yet, he said. Nathan is waiting for word and is with one of his men. Alpha Dean looked back at me. How is Lena? He asked. Where did she come from? I stared at him, but Logan explained what we had learned and what the young she-wolf told us. I looked over at her, she was sitting on a chair with Sophia. Alpha Dean let a low snarl slip past and looked at me. That explains a lot, he said, which made me frown. Alpha Dean sighed. That was the only place we never searched, he said. Alpha Frank told us about the child's death, and my father told us never to step foot in there. I looked at him. It seems to have been modified over the years, I said. Alpha Dean looked at me with a confused look. He went to open his mouth, but the door opened once again, and in walked the pack doctor. I moved out of the way and stepped in front of him, which startled him. "How is she?" I asked. The pack doctor looked at me, then at everyone else. His eyes landed back on me, and he sighed. "The young Luna is a strong one," he said. "Whatever she suffered when she was away has now healed, her injuries healed quicker when her wolf came back. Her only injury is the chunk the alpha wolf took from her. It will heal, but it might leave a huge stain in its wake as if it was from an alpha bite." I felt slightly relieved but also anxious about what I wanted to know next. "Can I see her?" I asked. The doctor looked at me and nodded. "She is asleep at the moment," he said and looked toward Tim. "Alpha Eli and Tim should go in and sit with her, and the others can see her when she wakes up." I nodded. "I will take you both now to see her," he said as he turned around. I looked at my father and then at Logan. "I will mind link you when she is awake," I said to him. Logan nodded. "I'm going up to that cabin," he muttered. "I need to see what else is there." I stared at him for a moment, but something was telling me he wanted answers, and he was the only one that could get them for us. "Be careful," I said and left, following the doctor out of the waiting room with Tim walking with me. The hospital was packed with corridors crowded with people. Pack members were covered in blood and wounds gaping open. I felt terrible for them, but my mind was on Lena. The doctor took us around a few corners of the hospital till we came to a quieter part of the hospital. "We placed the Luna in here," he said as he stopped outside a door. "We wanted her to have some rest." I nodded as he opened the door and walked in. I walked in behind him, with Tim following. The room was dim, but I looked toward the bed, and there was Lena, lying in the middle, looking slightly better than the last time I saw her. "She is asleep," the doctor whispered. "She should wake up soon. She's not in danger, but that wound might take a while to heal on its own, but it all depends on her wolf too." I looked at him and nodded. Tim and I went to different sides of the bed, where 2 chairs were placed on either side. I took my seat as he took his. The door opens and closes, letting us know that the doctor has left. The room was silent. I stared at Lena and placed my hand in hers. Tingles rippled through me as Blaze came closer to see her. "Mate," he whispered. He had been quiet during the whole of the findings, and he never said a word, and I started to get worried about him. "You okay?" I asked him. Blaze steps back and looks at me. "I'm okay," he mutters. "Want Mate to wake up?" I sighed. "I know," I said. There was silence between us, but Blaze spoke again. "Mate saved us," he whispered, feeling pride sweep over him. I didn't say anything to him but stared at Lena. My heart was racing. I needed her to wake up. I needed her to let me know she was all right. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.